My name is Hersy Jones Jr., and I'm a candidate for Caddo Parish Sheriff. I'm a native of Shreveport, grew up in Cedar Grove, educated at Captain Shreve, went to Dillon University, accounting major, went to Harvard Law School, and my family came here in 1850. My record shows I'm the best overall prepared for the office of sheriff. The sheriff's office has, although it is known to the public as law enforcement, and the Louisiana Constitution says the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in the parish, people forget the law side and they focus on the enforcement side. It is part of the judicial system. And its primary duties is to basically serve people. Every lawsuit filed in the parish is served by the sheriff. That's his primary duty. The other constitutional duty is to collect taxes. I was a tax lawyer. I understand the tax system. I understand how people are upset about the tax system. I'm sensitive to that, and I'm a lawyer for training, so I know the legal part. The other parts of the sheriff, they do sheriff sales, and that's legal. They do tax sales, and I'm familiar. The sheriff has messed up a lot of tax sales. A lot of titles are messed up because tax sales that took place, the sheriff didn't give the right constitutional notice, and that's no secret. So the legal part is just all of it. Then you got all the other regulations. You got the contract with the parish commission. That's legal. And there have been a lot of disputes between the sheriff and the DA, but that's all legal capacity with the jail. The sheriff is really not, it's a civilian job. It doesn't require law enforcement experience. And in each parish you look at, each person has made the sheriff's office what they want it to be within those confines. The Hathaway was sheriff. There were 150 deputies. By the time we finished, there was 700. So, he made it a little differently, and that's what I want to do. So all my experience, I worked with the community groups. I worked in corporate America. I was an executive with ARCLA. I consulted with businesses. The sheriff got to be an entrepreneur. So he's an elected official, he's got to be a salesman. So he's got to be able to understand when he's helping people with these safety issues and millages, the sheriff is really that civilian spokesman, and that's what the Constitution required. Let me add one more thing, and don't get upset with me, good Lord, but I'm an ordained minister. So I understand the spiritual side to law enforcement and to people, and that's one of our deficiencies, actually. The single most challenging public safety issue facing our community is really hopelessness. And people say, what are you talking about? I said, well, that's really what's driving the crime. Young people have just lost hope. They're in school. School is not addressing their needs. School is trying to teach them things that they don't see the relevance of. Young African-American men and women in the community, I'm from Cedar Grove, their number one need is money. School system doesn't address that. School systems in the past did address the needs of the students and the families. Our system is based on the agricultural system. Our system, our terms is based on the planting season. It was recognizing that families need money, young people need to go work. So summer months, they could be out, but come fall, they're in school, and then they would kind of adjust that. Okay, to make sure that people could meet that basic need of money. So hopelessness. Young people are hopeless. They're not trying to, they don't care if they get caught or not get caught. They don't care if they go to jail or die. They're committing crimes that are senseless. When you see the crime and they've shot somebody, it's over a watch, over a shoe, over a slight, forget about that. The public is focusing on, that's not a reason to shoot. That's not the issue. The issue is they knew they weren't going home after they shot. They knew they were either going to jail or going to the grave, and they didn't care. That's what we need to be focusing on. We give our young people hope, and same thing with our older people. They're hopeless, they don't vote, they don't get involved. So spiritually, people say we got a crime problem, and we do, the stats say it. We really got a spiritual wickedness, a weakness problem. We got a spiritual sickness. This city is just too mean. Law enforcement is too mean-spirited. They're looking for the opportunity to shoot and kill, and looking for the opportunity to exert authority. That's bad, and that's hurting us. So to me, that's the number one issue. Now, we look at the statistics. The other issue that they say go with that is financial stress. People are uptight. People are not making enough money. They're angry, they're working, and they're still broke. So when they hear a slight interaction, it explodes. That's the first, the spiritual part. The second part is the prevalence of guns. This parish just love guns. I'm not trying to take anybody's gun away from you, but you got to understand, most of the crimes we're talking about have to do with guns. Domestic disputes have to do with guns. Teenage crime, we're not really worried about the burglaries. We're talking about the shootings. All over the place, guns. People just think use a gun as self-help. That's the number one. Number two problem. In my prior life, I told you I was a tax lawyer, but I morphed into being a civil rights lawyer. So I had a chance to interact with a lot of law enforcement people. I sued them. After a while, I began to feel sorry for them. First, they were unprepared. I know the question is about the mental health issues in the citizens. Let me tell you, the real problem is the mental health issues with the law enforcement. They're in a lot of stress. They got family problems. They're overworked. They feel like they're underpaid. They're stressful. They got mental health issues. So first, I want to take care of my deputies and all those in law enforcement. We've got to address that. You can't leave them out high and dry. People say, oh, I love law enforcement. I said, no, you don't. If you love law enforcement, you would make sure they didn't have all this stress. Things you love, you take care of. So you got to train them, and you have to first address their issues, then train them. And once they recognize that they and their colleagues got mental health issues and need patience, then they'll be more patient when they deal with the citizens with mental health issues. See, mental health in this city has become, in the country, has become a bad word. We all got mental health issues. Let me say this, everybody has a mental health issue. It just comes out differently. We're talking about the people that can't control themselves. That's a real sickness. And that's obvious. So first, the officers got to be sensitive to that. First, they got to be trained. Secondly, in dealing with the citizens, the sheriff's department and law enforcement in general, that's a medical issue. So we need to reach out to people like LSU, Oxner, all the medical community, and they've got to be just as involved. They're getting money to do that. That's their job. People like David Ray's Mental Health Center, they do that. We need to reach out to people who are addressing that, incorporate them. Now, what I would do is have like a mobile mental health unit. You know, the bus, like they have with these buses, I have like 4 or 5 of those. And when you see people out, send them out first. People call the police and law enforcement because they don't have anybody else to call. But that's really not the right person because they're trained to deal with violence. And, it's like the Tony McLaughlin case, and you got many others. Many people are calling the police to help their sick relatives, and they end up dead because the police have said, I feel threatened. Bad interaction. So we got to be proactive with that. But we got to recognize that mental health is kind of like the way people used to treat obesity. It used to be a bad word. Now they recognize, hey, we're all obese in some way or another. We're all got health challenges. So we need to address that. We address that. The public is more sensitive to it. And I want to make sure that the deputies, not just the deputies, but all law enforcement understand this may not be the case for them. We may need to get somebody else. So that mobile unit I'm telling you about will be helpful. From what I understand, most have been successful. The problem with the bill, and I go back to the selling part of it, it became politicized. Actually, Chef Prater opposed the bill, made some inflammatory statements. Some say they were taken out of context, but those statements reflected that he didn't have a buy-in. The real issue with the bill, if I were selling the bill, is the real issue is we're incarcerating too many of our citizens. See, God gives us all assets. And our citizens, to our parish and to the state and to the country, these are our assets. Everything that's going to be invented, everything that's going to go well in our community, is going to come from our citizens. So if we're incarcerating too many of our citizens, we're like destroying part of our assets. So too many of our citizens are ending up in our criminal justice system, and that's not good. And so what the bill was designed to say is, we need to get those, got too many people are incarcerated, too many people, we need to get them back out into the working productivity, of our parish, of our state. So that's the goal. So it wasn't sold right. So because it wasn't sold right, we had people in the parish who just wanted to say, lock them up, throw the key away, without understanding, well, what sense did that make? Because we got to pay for them behind bars, and they got families that need to be out there, tearing apart families, they can't raise their families. So that's just not good. So that's the main thing. People need to know these are still citizens. They've been convicted of a crime and they've paid their time, so we got to get them back out. The bill was designed to deal with nonviolent crimes. I think it did. I think it helped people to see that. It's helped them to re-entry into the community. I worked with the program. Actually, years ago, I worked with Goodwill, had a re-entry program, and I'm sensitive to that. Worked with them, mentored some of the inmates, actually hired the inmate I mentored. It was a good experience. I don't think they did enough of it. I don't think it expanded. I think if you really got to engage more people into it, I don't even hear about the program now. So I don't hear anybody being challenged to be a part of it. And that's a flaw. So one thing I'll do is expand it. The second thing is it talked about reentry, it talked about job training. What I like to do is to make sure that the program would allow me as sheriff to take these young men that are sitting around in my jail and they're out in the community doing community service work. So I work with the Cedar Grove Neighborhood Association, and if we had gotten some inmates to help us clean up, pick up trees, storm debris we just had, that would have been a great thing. So I would expand it. We need to understand where law enforcement fits in crime. It primarily shows up after the crime is committed. Let's understand that. And so, more police on the corners is not going to address the crime problem. I mean, more police on the interstate will stop me from speeding. But that's because I can see them and I can make an adjustment. But it's not going to stop people from committing crime. It will, but it's really not going to get what we want from it. So when you're talking about youth in the sheriff's office, I understand that, and that's one of the primary reasons I'm running. Our young people got to have a chance. Too many of them are committing suicide, I call it, at an early age. They're ruining their lives, so we got to give them some hope. So what I want to do, the sheriff and law enforcement can be the bully pulpit. I've told you what the primary duties are, but the bully pulpit, the sheriff got to sound the alarm. With young people, they need more opportunities. They need more to give them hope. What I want to do is to create an entrepreneurial program. Like the current sheriff has Safety Town. I'll keep that, expand that. But I want to have an entrepreneurial program so that young people can know by the age of 12 that they can make money on their own. They don't have to rely on just having a job. We don't do that. And when you show them they want to make money, I know what gets the attention of inner city kids. It's money. I grew up in Cedar Grove. It's all about money and little girls. But the first thing is about money, all right? And so when you get their attention on, I'm going to show you how to make some money, And I've done this before. I did it when I was in college. We went to the prison system and we went to a boys' home and we taught free enterprise, a program called SITE. It was well received. So if you show them how to make money, but they got to stay in school, and then you fund them, get with the business community. Take junior achievement. I've done junior achievement, but you got to expand it. Put these people in business while they're in school. They can sell T-shirts. They can sell drugs. They can sell T-shirts. Right now, we're letting drug dealers and gangbangers be the only people to teach our young people how to make money. When I was growing up, you could cut grass. Not everybody got a lawn service. So they'll push that out. So we got to show young people how to make money. Secondly, I want to do a boxing program and do a boxing league. You know, this law enforcement here does not have a police athletic league. They have them in big cities. We don't have them here. They got one in boxing, a boxing program they just celebrated the 50th anniversary of getting the inner city kids off the streets. And it's called Put Down the Guns, Pick Up the Gloves. So if somebody got a little dispute, we'll tell them, hey, we can do a boxing match. And then that'll give them a way to resolve the dispute, but you also put some adult supervision. So the sheriff's office has to be the bully pulpit, but I think the things I'm talking about will work as well. And but you can't just put more law enforcement on the youth. You got to give them hope. Well, I've been addressing some of those. Let me tell you the main thing on the capacity issues is not to build bigger jails. It's to make sure we don't have to put people in the jail. And we need to work with the court system. You know, jail, it's kind of like you deal with an animal. Not every animal needs to be on a leash and in a pen. Dangerous animals have to. And when you start talking about jail, it's the same with citizens. We can't have a system that if you get stopped for speeding, you go to jail. I mean, just can't. That don't make any kind of sense. And so we're complaining that we don't have the capacity, but at the same time, you know, oh, you didn't pay your child support. I got to arrest you. What does that mean? I got to go to jail. Does it really mean I have to go to jail? The president and those just got arrested, they didn't go to jail. That one went to jail because he couldn't work it out, but they had a system where he didn't. Because why? It was nonviolent. And that's the way it ought to be. Nonviolent offenses ought to have a system that you don't have to go to jail. That's first thing. Same thing with youth. Now, I understand that it's exploding, but the capacity out there, not a whole lot of youth commit a whole lot of crime. There are a lot of high-profile crimes. But again, same thing with youth. Do they really have to go to jail? You know, what I would like to do is to create a system where you have people who may want to be surrogate jailers, you may call it, in their homes. And for young people who come through that I think they're nonviolent and they just got some issues, rather than putting them in and locking them in, you could, you know, kind of like outsource it a little bit and create kind of like, you know, maybe halfway houses. That's not the right term, but we got to be creative with that. But the system is not to use, the solution is not to use more taxpayers' money to build bigger jails. We just got to be creative. Now, I say that back to being an entrepreneur. I run a business. I run many businesses. When I was 30, I was one of the youngest investors and co-owners of a Ford Lincoln Mercury dealership up in Kansas City. I know how to make money. I know how to be creative. And that's what I bring to the table. I have not just been a lawyer behind the desk. I've not just been, you know, somebody that's been in administrative duties. And as a sheriff, you get the creativity. And that's what entrepreneurship means. It's creativity. So the sheriff's office has a lot of potential. It's been underused because people want to make it a law enforcement job. Now, they wanted to make it a law enforcement job because they were in law enforcement. But that's not what the job is. And Sheriff Prater finally has come to say that. You know, his solution was tough on crime, careful with your money. That's when he was a police chief. But after he became sheriff and after 30 years, he's now saying this is really a job for a lawyer. And he really means creativity and flexibility. You know, because of my legal background, and I've always found it funny on the dispute between the DA and the sheriff. The sheriff would say, my jail. And I would say, no, I think it's the parish's jail. They just contracted with the sheriff to run it. But the parish is really responsible. That's why they pay the sheriff. But the sheriff is really, it's really the parish's jail. The sheriff's office is part of the judicial system. It's a team. When you look at the Constitution, it's under the judges, judicial system. So it works with the court. That's its primary duties. And the DA and the coroner, they're all part of that too. So it's all one big team. And so that's the first thing. When I come to the table, I understand that it's one big team. But secondly, part of the dispute is the sheriff doesn't understand just because you arrest somebody doesn't mean you get to hold them in jail. You don't get to run them through the court system. And I'm sensitive to that. And the sheriff may have been a little, not sensitive to it, because on the back end, what you're going to get, and what we are getting, is a lot of people arrested can't afford lawyers, and the court system itself has a backlog on public defenders. And so they can't really get people lawyers. And so it looks like the DA is holding them in and they got constitutional rights. You got to respect that. But then when the sheriff pushing it, and the sheriff is pushing it, like, well, you just can't push it and say, I arrested them and you letting them go. No, he didn't let them go. The system said, these are the rules you got to follow. And so as a lawyer, I'm sensitive to that. But here's what I think should happen. If we go back into the jail and those people in the jail sitting there, I would make sure they're just not sitting around. I would put them out and work out a way if they could get some job training. I'd give them some incentives. I need to make sure I can do this, but I think I can get a lot of work out of the trade-off, and I want to pay them. You know, one of my #1 platforms was to end legalized slavery in the criminal justice system. People say, what are you talking about? I said, well, the 13th Amendment did not eliminate slavery. It said you could keep slavery if they're duly convicted. So therefore, our judicial system is really on a model of slavery, i.e. if they work, I don't get to pay them. I can do them any way I want. At least they thought that until the court system weighed in. So I want to make sure that we pay them when they come in, but I give them an incentive, and then they can do work in the community, particularly those that are nonviolent, and especially those that are nonviolent and trustworthy. So then while they're there, they can get some good from the community, and then I work with the system, I work with the court system to make sure that those that are not nonviolent and that meet certain criteria, that we can kind of not release them early, but we can let them spend their time sort of at home, almost like our early parole. Do I believe it's necessary? I'm not sure at this point I can answer that question, because necessary requires, do they need the extra money? So they say it's necessary because they need extra programs. That's one definition of necessary. But here's what I do know, and I'll take the city of Shreveport in particular. When I saw the salaries they were paying, $180,000, $190,000 for the CAO, the mayor's making about $100,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of overuse of money. You multiply it by 6, 7. That's a lot of money. The CAO makes $180,000. 4 years. You're talking about what's that? $700,000, almost $750,000 for 4 years of sitting on your butt doing nothing. With all the systems messed up, that's a lot of money. Wasted money. So you just can't go out. I have an accounting degree, and so I have a kind of an auditor background. Is it really worth it? Some people say I'm cheap. I said, no, I'm frugal. Is it really worth it? I mean, I'm not going to pay you to do something I can do myself. But our consumerism is based on that. So we got to make sure, as a tax collector, some say, I just collect the taxes. I say, well, if I collect the taxes, I'll have some say so at least on checking to see, what did you do with the money? Somebody got to hold these agencies accountable. We collect the money. We don't just collect it and turn it over to you and then you tell us, stay out of our business. No, it's our business. Taxpayers are investing and we've got the right to check the return on our investment. So if we collect the money and give it to you, we ought to have some say so. I think the sheriff's office is the right person to at least double check. I'm not talking about just audit to see if you stole it. I'm talking about, did you do the best use with it? Let me show you what I'm talking about when they're talking about it. When you see a shooting and they're like 20 cars out there, I'm like, 20 cars? 30 cars? So you stop people on the thing for a ticket, 4 cars? Like, what are you talking about? That's waste of resources. So don't tell me you got a shortage when I can see you're overusing it. So my business analysis, the business background, says, it looks like waste to me. Oh, well, okay. Well, we don't have that. We got a problem, you said. You said we got a shortage. So now people are saying, hey, we need money. We want to do more public programs. I want to do them too, but we already got SPAR. We got commission, got recreational program. What are you doing with that? But I think you're paying them $200,000. $180,000 to the heads. So it just looks like what the agencies are saying is, we get the right to spend the money any way we want, and when we're broke, we come back to the citizens and say, give us more. From a business standpoint, I said, no, and so that's what I think I bring to the table with an accounting and tax background. I said, we're just not going to get some slush fund over here, you go waste the money any way you want. They say, I'm short, give me more money. Not going to happen under my watch. That's a good question, because efficiency is always good, but sometimes you can be too efficient. And I'm going to liken it to churches. Churches collect money from a lot of people, and then they say they're going to return that money to the people in need. And on one hand, that's a good thing. But on the other hand, the people who are giving the money and the people who are receiving the money never meet. And that's a bad thing. Because the people who are receiving the money are not receiving the money from the people who gave the money, so they're not really thanking the people who gave the money. They're not to have gratitude. And the people who are giving the money are not really seeing the people who are receiving the money, so they missed an opportunity to connect. So here's what I'm saying with the tax system. If it's too centralized, then the people who are paying the taxes, if they're complaining or feel like what's going on, it's centralized, it's collected. It's like, who's going to perform the function I think need to be performed? And the point is, I think you got to have it. It can't be too centralized. So when the sheriff is collecting the taxes and people have complaints about the taxes, they can go chase the sheriff down. They can see the sheriff. Sheriff got to be elected at least every 4 years. But if the sheriff is not collecting the taxes, and then when people are complaining about what they do with the taxes, who do they really reach out to and hold accountable? So I think having the sheriff in the parish to collect the taxes, I think that's a good thing. And so if you make it too centralized, it sounds like it's efficient, but it's also like out of sight, out of mind. So that's my ramblings on that. I don't think I have a definite opinion on what it is. Those are my concerns, though. There's been a lot of discussion about the crime problem and the role of in the city of Shreveport and the role of the sheriff's office. The sheriff is primarily said, Sheriff Prater we're talking about, that his primary duties are outside the city limits of the city of Shreveport, and the crime is low, and he's doing a great job. But the city and people who work with the city have said, you know, the big explosions in the city of Shreveport, and we need the sheriff's help. And so there's been that debate about that. Both are short. Some will say, let's get people from the sheriff. The sheriff is short. The city is short. My platform starts with all citizens, all candidates are against criminals in the community. But I'm the only one against criminals in law enforcement. So people say, are you against law? I said, no, I'm not. I sued law enforcement a lot, and you know who was one of my biggest fans? Good police officers, good detectives. They used to chase me down and thank me. He said, look, Attorney Jones, we're not against you. You're helping get rid of the very ones that we've been complaining about. They call them thrill seekers. They come on with bad attitudes. They come on with racist attitudes. They come on with opportunistic attitudes. They have taken an oath to follow the law, and then they have not followed the law, and we haven't held them accountable. That is causing an erosion of our respect for the law from top down. When citizens see police break the law and nobody speaks out, here's the problem that causes. The city of Shreveport in, I think it was 2018, 2019, had 420 applicants. 2022, they had 150. It has caused the law enforcement to not be an honorable profession by a reputation, and people don't want to be. It's the pay, that's part of the pay, but they don't want to be. Because why? They don't want to be viewed. Every profession has this issue. That's the issue. So my platform is say, let's put integrity back in, and then the crime problem requires the buy-in from the African-American community, and the African-American community are not going to buy in because they don't trust law enforcement. So we cannot have the African-American community, where most of the crime in the inner cities are taking place, not participate in helping the police. We've got to fix that logjam, and I'm saying let's fix that. My strategic analysis says that's where the rubber meets the road. We put integrity, and what's wrong with asking people who have committed and taken an oath to follow the law to follow the law? What's wrong with holding them accountable? That's not radical, that's just good sense. So once we do that, then we're going to get the African-American community to buy in. We won't need as many police officers, and we won't need, the shortage won't be as pronounced.